let's go over what happened with Tulsi Gabbard. She releases these documents, and now Pam Bondi and the team are responding.
The DOJ put out a press release announcing the formation of a strike force to assess evidence publicized by the ODNI, and they say they are going to investigate potential next legal steps which might stem from DNI Gabbard's disclosures. For many people, this term strike force is something new, something that you don't hear about that often. But that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have your dad on, because he has direct experience with strike forces in the DOJ and what that means, what they're capable of. So I want to go right to you. What is this strike force that is being assembled within the DOJ?
So first of all, let me tell you what it's not. It's not a special counsel. It's not a group of lawyers that the Department of Justice sequesters into their own area, and their reporting is different. This is within the Justice Department. And strike forces and task force are used by the Department of Justice when there has been credible evidence of wrongdoing at a nature and scope that the Attorney General determines there needs to be a dedicated team. It could be multiple offices. It will be. It could be multiple agencies. It'll be in cooperation, as Pam Bondi has said, and as Tulsi has said. Pam and Tulsi have both said that they will be working together. So it'll be a multi-governmental agency group, multi-attorneys within the Department of Justice. They do sometimes bring in outside lawyers. I worked on, after 9/11, some of the legal work that needed to take place for information sharing and information gathering to prevent the terrorist attacks. And we had a special task force, strike force set up for that. It was done to get legislation through. So these entities, under the authority of the Attorney General, are dedicated to this one specific task. And this is a big task because the weaponization of the Department of Justice and I've been saying the Brennan, Clapper, Comey issues have been real for a long time. I think we need to know exactly what happened, and this will do that. But it's an interagency. Sometimes outside lawyers come in and consult with the Department of Justice. I actually, after Logan, you called me on it and asked about it. I remember also I was on one for John Ashcroft in a separate matter, and that was we had a task force set up to go after child sex trafficking and pornography. So these are not unusual, but they're very dedicated and very specific in their orientation and to what the goal is.
And when you look at the fact that the DOJ is taking these steps, it's not just being assigned to one U.S. attorney's office to look at and see if there's anything there. It shows there is positive movement for those of us that want to see accountability, that want to see some sort of real justice from what was perpetrated on this country almost how many years ago? 8 years ago now, almost 10 years ago in some cases. But when you have to look at this and also think that there are limitations with what we've talked about on the show. The President Obama obviously is being brought up a lot with this. There is a recent immunity ruling, but this does bring up that there could be real accountability for these individuals that were perpetrating this against the United States. But I want to get your take on what some realistic expectations of an outcome, not prejudging the team's work, but what we could be looking at from the DOJ with something like this.
Well, there's two things that we need to know from the outset. Number one, and this is important to understand, is rather than having a U.S. Attorney's Office deal with this, where they have 50, 60, 150, 200 other cases, these are lawyers that will be handpicked within the Department of Justice to focus on this activity. It is the Department of Justice, so they have full subpoena power, indictments. All of that can happen. Now, I want to say something about the president's situation as it relates to President Obama. Remember, it was President Trump. We were involved in it. We went to the Supreme Court of the United States to argue immunity for presidents when they're involving official acts. And the court ruled totally in our favor. And so I think tagging President Obama on this is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, Dad, that's one of the questions that a lot of people seem to have is you put Barack Obama on this, you start using words like treason, you start using these kind of phrases, and you start thinking, okay, are they reaching too far? Now, yesterday when some people called in, I said, yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen. You have presidential immunity now. I don't think also you're going to have anything happen to President Obama. It feels like a kind of, maybe he's a fringe character in this, but could be. But now they're putting together this strike force. It certainly seems like they're taking it a step further and much quicker than I anticipated.
Yes, and you're exactly correct, Logan. And that is the strike force is dedicated to finding justice, which means they will subpoena, they will review documents, I'm sure they will. They'll impanel a grand jury dedicated to this. They can do that as well. So this is when they say strike force, think about it in the context of military. It's an operation dedicated to one task, taking President Obama out of it, because that raises a whole host of constitutional issues that affect the presidency. But the others, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, others, they don't have that immunity. So if there is culpability and criminal liability, they can be held accountable for what has happened. It will not just be a special counsel report. They can take direct action here.
Here's the other issue, Logan, and we talked last segment about not being behind a paywall and not, we want to get truth out. We want to get information out. That's a big part of what the ACLJ does, whether it's through the courts or through this broadcast. But many of these agencies, news organizations, don't want you to know the truth. They want to protect you from the truth as they see it. Now, let's go ahead and play. This is how CNN was covering the daily press briefing from the White House, where it was a big surprise moment. The director of national intelligence was speaking from the podium. That's normally a let's tune into this. But as soon as she started, maybe throwing some things out there, reading from the intelligence they've given to the Department of Justice, which implicated some of CNN's favorite people. Some of them, I think, have been employed by CNN as commentators. So here's how they decided to handle when she got to the podium. Let's run bite 6. And if you're watching, you'll be able to really see the full measure of them trying to protect the people from the truth.
Multiple intelligence community assessments released in the months leading up to the November 2016 election concluded that Russia had neither the intent nor capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election. On December 5th.
We've been listening there to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, continuing on what has now been a multi-day effort, not only with public statements like this, but release of documents to attempt to back up the quite extreme allegation that President Obama is guilty of treason and that he worked in some sort of conspiracy.
That is CNN deciding, you know what, we don't like what she's saying. And look, we've seen this multiple times with a lot of networks, including, remember, George Stephanopoulos, my dad was speaking, doing the famous, kill sign, to get off of him. Because when they don't like what's being said, it's not for you to decide whether you agree with them or disagree with them. It's for them to decide. And they won't even give Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, give her a few minutes to speak what she is saying, to not only put out all these documents, but then go, here's the real answer. President Obama wants to respond. Well, here's my response to that.